I think both of us felt like that was a really beautiful experience, because as much as the draw was having a big celebrity there, that energy dissipated, I think, really quickly. I don't know what you think, Penn.
They were disappointed. Let's be honest.
They hate it. No, the energy of, like, fanning over somebody famous was very quickly replaced with hunger for like a genuine, true conversation.
Yeah. We do.
Badgley, and we have Dr. Nura Mowzoon.
Yeah. Wow. What a dynamic duo.
Yeah, because a lot of their focus, and they're interesting because Penn is in a show, you've probably always seen it, You.
I've heard about You.
Which is very
Wait a
much...
minute, You or You?
You.
Oh, I was about to do a Bud Abbott thing. Did you see that?
Yeah.
That was kind of cool.
You. And I gotta be honest.
Yeah.
I saw the first like 2 episodes.
I hear it's hard.
But then I got real nauseous.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is too much for me.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I mean, my husband was okay, and he's like, and he's like, I'm getting really like nervous. It was kind of, it's just tense.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine for Penn what that must be like.
I think he wrestles with it too. I mean, I think he wrestles with the subject matter. It's intense subject matter in the show,
Well, I think that's probably what brought him to having this kind of, this relationship and this, friendship with Nura, who is a couples coach, and who I have known for a really long time.
She's like your homegirl.
Yeah, she is. They're both going to be speaking a lot, and they have been speaking a lot to individuals about relationships and what goes into creating these healthy relationships. And for us, because we're focusing on with Choose Unity, we're focusing on what it takes to be an activist, what it takes to create change in your community.
Yeah.
And it all comes down to the core of your relationships.
It's like it's constant like reassessment of what's working and what's not working, what has worked and what has not worked. And am I getting out of my relationships? Am I putting in and getting out of them the best that I possibly can, right?
Something that's always guided me with any of my work and anything I've dedicated my life to is this idea of this higher energy or source. That's been for me. I know everybody's different, but I'm working towards something that is bigger than me.
Definitely having a consciousness, a sense of connectedness to something that's greater than oneself. That's something that's beyond, us. And this is for me, this gets at the core of the relationship of the individual soul to God or to the Great Spirit or to whatever you want to call that source.
You can take that dynamic and then you can sprinkle some of that into your relationships and your friendships. What would the world look like then?
Yeah. And that is exactly what Penn and Nura are doing in their work. They're, they are being intentional about helping, first of all, themselves to understand what healthier, better functioning relationships look like. And then in their public discourse, they've been fortunate to speak at colleges, universities, and other spaces to share that learning with the community. Removing, violence in discourse, creating spaces that are about encouragement, about mutual support and upliftment, And I love the way, I think I read something, or I saw Nura give a talk about putting positivity into a relationship to replace the negativity that is already present there. And I'm hoping that maybe they'll talk about some of that today. So I'm just looking forward to learning, man. I mean, and being better at building and sustaining better relationships. So we should do it.
Absolutely.
You ready to do it?
You ready?
Let's
I'm ready.
Go, man.
Okay.
Let's
I think
go.
they're waiting for us anyway.
Right.
It's so awesome to have you both here. You've been working together and focusing on relationships. You, of course, is about a not so healthy relationship. But
I don't know what you mean.
Of course you don't.
Oh boy. We've been talking to a lot of change makers, and they're walking us through the vision they have for the world that they want to create. But we know that at the heart of it and the microcosm of society are these individual relationships we have with people. So if those relationships do not reflect what it is that we want to see in the world, we can't make that change. And that's why we're having you both here today to talk a little bit about, maybe you could first start off and tell us how you two came together to work on this.
Actually, it's my understanding that we came together through my producing partner, Nava, who's been friends with Nura for a long time.
So Nava was a good friend of mine. She lived out here. And then when she moved to New York, she became close friends with Penn. You know how you have one of those times where an idea is just like flashed into your head and you're not really sure where it came from, but you know you have to act on it. I just had this flash that I should see if I could connect to him to see if he'd be willing to come to the university I work at, to Arizona State, to give a talk actually about his character on you, as well as like just media and how media informs our view of what's a healthy relationship and what we should be looking for and striving for. So it all just gelled really easily. It flowed really smoothly, and he came out here and we just kind of became a bit of a team after that. So I invited him to come, and before he knew what I did, he was like, you know, it would be great if I was like on the stage having a conversation with like some kind of an expert about relationships. And I was like, funny you should mention that.
So there's something really like profound. You don't even realize the people that you're meeting and hopefully you're developing these authentic connections with actually serve to open up doors for you or connect you to somebody else. Cultivating these, you know, sincere relationships that aren't predicated on what you can do for me, what I can do for you, but just, you're good people. I'd like to get to know you.
Well, I think at the heart of a genuine relationship is where you find, that's where you find support. It's where you find encouragement. It's where you find motivation. It's really, I was actually having this conversation with Nava the other day that I think it's actually impossible to feel inspired and isolated at the same time. So I think that at the core of relationships is the drive and the inspiration and the push to serve, to show up, to find the courage to align with your calling. It empowers us in so many ways.
Penn, do you have some thoughts on that, man?
Well, you know, I think it's like boiling it down to some kind of really simple, emotionally digestible thing is like, at the end of the day, when we talk about social justice, when we talk about social progress, social transformation, we're talking about a system of relationships. It's all about relationships. It's about how we relate to one another, about how we see ourselves and how we see each other, and how we treat each other and how we treat ourselves, and how we either do or don't receive support in that, how we do or don't give support in that. It actually is not that complicated. It ends up being complex when you have 7 billion people.
Yeah.
But it's not that complicated. It's really like if you find great challenges and frustrations in your most intimate relationships, how could we assume that it's going to be any different at any higher level?
Yeah.
Whether it's, you know, it's like if in your house you're struggling, what about on your street? What about in your neighborhood? What about in your city, state, nation, you know, and it goes on. So to me, I just feel like at the beginning of every day and at the end of every day, you know, you're alone with your thoughts. And while the work of social justice is not only emotional, it is very emotional. And there's something that I think we're lacking. I mean, look, it's like we don't live in a white supremacy, but all have emotional health. Right? we don't live in a corporatocracy, but we're all like, you know, mentally healthy. And the reason we're struggling in our most intimate relationships is because of the biggest and smallest reasons. And first, I think the first step is like admitting and accepting that and starting to really understand the implications, you know, and then trying, and in understanding those implications better is like, all right, so how do I actually change that? How do I work on that? You know, how, like, if I really want to be an agent of change, if I want to contribute to the betterment of society, like, I think I have to see my closest relationships as being the first step towards that, and not the only step. I'm not at all saying that's like, you know, just do your part kind of thing. You know what I mean? Just like kind of work in your own bubble. And that's not really it. But I think, you know, it really is just like our significant other, our siblings, our parents, our children, our friends, colleagues, classmates. Like, it matters. Everything I just think, again, it's very simple. It's like everything we do matters.
There was that big E word, that capital E word that came in there, encouragement. Which I think is such a profound dimension of relationships, you know? I mean, relationships is an indication of need, legitimate need on both parties, right? We enter into a relationship because there is some emotional, supportive need for community. For all of you guys, like, if you can point to a specific like moment in your life where that big E word, encouragement, played a significant part in helping you move forward in your life. And I don't know, maybe Nava, if you want to take that first, and then we can, I'd love to hear what Nura says, and then Penn as well.
I can speak to encouragement, but I think in some ways it might be clearer if I can speak to discouragement or not a lack of encouragement in a situation and what that has resulted in my life.
Yeah, sure.
As a youth, I felt I could achieve anything. I felt I was working hard. I felt like, you know, there was certain contributions that I wanted to make. And then the moment I got into a relationship with somebody that was the opposite of encouragement, that all died down. I was not able to contribute to my community. I couldn't contribute to my family members. I couldn't really breathe. I couldn't be the light that each of us have within us. And I think it just extinguishes that. So it's such an important part of growth. Yeah. It's such an empowerment and encouragement, allows a person to step out into the world and offer something that is substantial, that is unique to them. Yeah. And the whole part of activism and being a change maker is being in this process, continuous process of growth. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Encouragement and growth.
Nura?
Yeah.
I encourage you to go on.
We give you all of the easy questions.
Well, you know, Masud, you asked that question, and then my thoughts went directly to, obviously, to myself and my experiences. And, well, for me, encouragement was really at the heart of healing from a lot of like childhood pains.
No, it's okay. Let it go. Let it go. Let it go.
This is what we came for.
Yeah.
It's, you all came to watch me cry. Honestly, I don't think I would be doing what I'm doing if it wasn't for the encouragement of my closest friends, like especially Nava. Love you. Sorry.
Oh.
Because I think we all go through so much pain in different ways. You know, I was lucky to have like a very stable family life, but my friends hurt me a lot. My peer group hurt me a lot growing up. And it wasn't until I realized what a healthy friendship looked like that I found what the power of encouragement can do, because it heals.
Yeah.
It heals. It forces you to look at parts of yourself that you've been groomed to think don't exist. And it pushes you to tune into your nobility in a way that pain clouds.
Yeah.
And then I was thinking about what I do as a relationship coach, and working with people in their love dynamics. And as a coach or a therapist or a counselor, the heart of that is encouragement as well. Yeah. The entire heart of that field is walking this path with your client for them to unearth the gems within them. It's all encouragement, growth, healing. All of it is rooted in encouragement. And I think that is at the core of changing the world, is feeling that support and that push to actually like own the gifts that you were given, that every single person has been given. Everybody's here for a reason, and encouragement is what unearths that. So many of us.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you for that. Penn, you're going to share something?
Thank you.
I just keep having a whole host of technical difficulties. Hopefully that background's being filtered out.
We don't hear it.
We don't hear anything.
Great.
You're fine.
Great. Now, how about my scattered thoughts? Can you filter those for me, please?
Yeah, I'm gonna hit that button right now.
Okay. Yeah.
Where's that? Did you feel it? Did you feel it?
Feature on the whole social order. I mean, my inclination right now, for the sake of a conversation, is to, because I understand what Nura said to be true, and believe in the power of encouragement, kind of above many other powers that we utilize. I'm just sort of wanting to push back on that for the sake of those listening. I mean, we're while we believe this, we're also like testing a theory. It's not. The reason we've landed on encouragement as this focal point is because it seems to be not entirely missing, but it's overlooked.
Yeah.
I think the significance of its power, the uniqueness of its power, is overlooked.
Yeah.
Even as we embrace many principles of self-care and fellowship and global unity, it does feel as though the general discourse is becoming more and more volatile and violent, and it's been critical for a long time.
Yeah.
There's something that Nura just said that I thought was really interesting, something to the effect of like encouragement helps you see or feel the parts of yourself that you've been groomed to think were not there.
Yeah, I love that.
I thought that was a really interesting way to put it.
Yeah.
I guess I'm wondering, like, how do we come to overlook parts of ourselves, and then how do we come to regain them and empower them? What is if we're talking about encouragement, let's say we're just focusing on this one thing. Let's just say we're saying encouragement heals all, it saves all. Like, let's just say, what are the different ways that looks? How we could also call it love. When people become cynical about love being able to solve the world's problems, I fully understand that intellectually. But I think that's also because of a really superficial and narrow definition of love. It's a misconception of love.
Yeah.
But fully understanding why such a superficial definition of love does not sound like the answer to the world's problems. We don't just have one problem. We don't just have several. We have it's like every possible box you could think to check is checked right now. And it's discouraging, I think, is the point. Like, even for brilliant, countless brilliant voices out there, we have so many ideas about how things are going to get fixed, and we're so accustomed to looking towards others. And there's something about the spirit of genuine love, which we're calling encouragement, that I think it makes you a protagonist. It makes you. Yeah. I mean, there's so many platitudes we've heard. They've been siphoned of their meaning, but they're profound. Like, we're the ones we're waiting for, or hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. These things are profoundly true, but somehow they are being siphoned of their meaning in our increasingly materialistic culture. So I think somehow it's just the spirit of encouragement is meant to give these things life again. And I'll try and think of a time that I was encouraged, and it's hard, because I will say that when you grow up in dysfunctional environments, at home and at work.
Yeah.
When you learn about very toxic misconceptions of power,
Yeah.
that's when you give love a very narrow definition, and you don't really see the spirit of encouragement. Yeah. And, you know, I will say that I'm probably only now really learning to recognize it. This is not to say that I didn't receive it throughout my life. Of course I did, but for a number of reasons, I don't know how much I ever recognized it. And because I was working professionally so young, it's almost like I received encouragement through employment, but not so much through like relationships. And I have to say, actually, maybe I'm a great example of, like, you know, of all the material success I've gained, you would think that I would feel quite encouraged as a result, right? Like, but I think it's, you know, being at the apex of my career, still provided actually just a complete absence of the most meaningful kind of support you need. And it really can only come through relationships. You know, it can really only come through like meaningful friendships that have a purpose that in their core.
You brought up this, how the spiritual principle of encouragement is really at the heart of the Baha'i faith, right? Of the Baha'i teachings. You talked about Abdul-Baha, you know, son of Baha'u'llah, the prophet, founder of the faith, saying that the essence of the Baha'i faith essentially is encouragement, right? And that's such a like profoundly like revolutionary thought to me.
Yeah.
You know, because I'm thinking like, so I feel like so many people in the world are starved of encouragement. Like we ration it out. Like there's like, you know, like it's this like, you know, this resource that is finite and that we don't have enough of it. So we're very like, you know, we parse it out here and there and we give it out like it's like, you know, like we're doing a favor, like we're doing like this sincere favor for this other person, and we are. But encouragement also has an impact on a person who is encouraging, which is really profound.
Well, it was making me think that like I think a person is only afraid to encourage when they're insecure themselves.
Ah, that's deep.
Yeah.
That's deep.
You know, like that's just what comes to my mind.
Yeah. And I feel sometimes, you know, fatherly, motherly figures sometimes don't do that because they think, well, my child needs to toughen up.
Yeah.
They're going to get into a world where they're not going to have encouragement. So they just need to learn how to live like that. And I think it's the opposite of preparing them for the future.
Yeah.
Actually, I want to talk about that because I'm a mom. I have a 2-year-old son, and I think about encouragement all the time. And I know your mother played a really the biggest role in your life.
Yeah.
You were raised by a single mother.
Yeah.
And the things that you're doing now, I go, wow, what an incredible person and man. Oh. And then I look to your mom.
Yeah.
So maybe you could speak a little bit on that.
Well, I mean, you know, my mother was this dynamic woman who raised me deeply, incredibly gifted, but also deeply and incredibly troubled as well by her upbringing and things she experienced, physical and emotional violence. But I will say that at the heart of our relationship, what I always felt growing up was that she was identifying the parts of me that she found to be unique and special and encouraging me to develop those parts of myself. So I started drawing when I was 4 years old. My mother thought, you know, the sun and the moon had come down, you know, because she had this artistic, creative bent in herself. She's a writer. And so she would do everything that she could to facilitate my development as a visual artist. So we'd go to Museum of Modern Art as a kid, Metropolitan Museum, and she got me books on Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci. So she really did a lot to facilitate that. And then she took me to the theater. I mean, God, I remember seeing Bubbling Brown Sugar and The Wiz, you know, like, I mean, as a kid, and I just thought like that was the most incredible experience. So I was fortunate in that way because I was kind of bathed in a kind of encouragement of my artistic inclinations, where a lot of kids are kind of diverted. They're like, well, yeah, that's nice, but you're not going to be able to earn a living doing that. So do something else. And unfortunately, I think we kill a lot of kids' dreams and also their purpose in life because we're trying to direct them in something that they're not meant to do. So for me, that's kind of what the part that she played. I'm eternally grateful for that because I probably wouldn't be doing the things that I'm doing now if it wasn't for her and for teachers and other people along the way at critical moments.
Yeah.
When I didn't believe it in myself, as Nura was saying so eloquently, they looked at me and they said, there's something in you. You cannot see it, Masud, but I see it. And maybe in that moment I didn't fully accept it, but it haunted me just enough to get me to put one foot in front of the other. And then as I stepped a little bit more, I began to believe it myself.
Yeah.
And I think that is, man, encouragement is freaking alchemy. I mean, it is magic. And we don't really fully understand its power.
No.
And when we're conscious and we're looking with intention, we can see it will turn a gestating worm into a butterfly. And that's the power of it. It's uncanny what an incredible force it is in the world. Something I was really interested in, like, just unpacking right quick. This whole notion of, in relationships, in dialogue, in discourse, right? Removing the violence out of discourse, and what does violence in discourse look like? And how do we go about the process of extricating that from our discourse and creating spaces, safe spaces where we can dialogue in a space of mutual understanding and learning and growth?
Actually, I have the same question. Can you guys help us out?
Are you turning that back on us?
Well, so
We just have a theory. We have nothing else around it.
one of the reasons that I think that we really underestimate the power of these subtler emotional facets of ourselves that respond to love, that respond to encouragement, that respond to kindness and patience and gentleness, one of the reasons that we don't have faith in that is because basically, I'm going to go out on a limb here and just, someone please check me, but I'm going to say,
go for it.
That culturally we're just kind of like an abused child. We're like, we don't believe in those things because we've been so abused collectively. It's pretty clear, and this is actually just, this checks out at the individual level. There's a lot of meaningful research done trying to understand trauma. And I think particularly the last couple of decades, we understand it really well. I mean, even things like the 12-step program and all the different iterations it has in dealing with trauma and dysfunction and addiction, we understand that trauma has profound effects on the individual. So why wouldn't it have profound effects on society?
Yeah, for sure.
Recognizing how violent we've come to accept as base level. And actually, a lot of people talk about that, but I think the cruelness of cruelty is that it's hard to learn how to stop being violent when you've been traumatized.
Yeah.
It's really, really, really hard. Doesn't mean that you're being physically violent, but emotionally so, intellectually, just, look, if we know if silence can be violence, like, really unpack that. If somebody's silence can be violent, then how much more can a word? How much more can a blow? How much more can a law? How much more? So we're just suffering through so much violence in a way that we, just like a very, very, very traumatized child, simply do not recognize any other means, any other way. We are still fighting to stop fighting. You know.
Yeah.
And again, like, there's a lot of psychology behind this, a lot of, like, more studied people who could unpack that in more scientific terms. And, but I do think it's just about, I don't know, there's something very interesting to us about boiling it down to this very simple level stuff.
Yeah. Wow. Nura, maybe you can talk to the ways of possibly extricating the violence out of the discourse. What are some steps that you see that are productive for that process?
In my mind, this is one of the principles that they teach actually when you're getting trained as a therapist, is it's not so much about removing something, but it's actually about replacing it with something else. And so removing violence, like, in theory, is what we're talking about, but at the core of it, it's actually about replacing it with love and encouragement. And for me, I tend to come at it from a bit of a more psychological perspective, because we're, like Penn mentioned, we're yelling at each other to stop yelling. We're screaming about peace.
Yeah.
And then we're wondering why nothing is changing.
I think recognizing the nature of this problem is actually quite immense. It's happening, but it hasn't happened. You know, it's happening. So we're a little bit like an individual coming to realize, like, whoa, I grew up in a really violent household, and that really had effects on me. And I'm in my umpteenth relationship that just dissolved in a fireball. I'm really trying to understand, like, why is this happening? Going back to the original trauma, you know, and societally, like, what does that mean? So I fully agree with, because it's actually scientifically understood from a psychological perspective, that we are to, you know, it is about like replacing the absence with something positive rather than just trying to deconstruct that bad thing.
When we're talking about, I grew up in a violent household. I mean, people will listen to that and they'll think, oh, you know, I was hit, or, you know, more latent subtleties of violence that exist within our childhood traumas that we wouldn't be able to recognize.
Yeah.
So individually, like, just being discouraged and hyper-criticized, you know, a child not being encouraged to grow. And then, but in the way that looks societally, because we're also talking about this at the social level, I think it's like the existence of systemic racism.
Yeah, I mean, I think in particularly in marginalized communities, the Black community, and indigenous communities as well, the entire society historically has acted as an inhibitor to developing a healthy self-esteem. So it makes having a strong family core that much more important. But what happens when you have children? As you know, there's a diversity of strength. There's a different, you know, iterations or different magnitudes of strength and or weakness in family systems. So what happens if you happen to be a Black or brown child coming from a family system that is not healthy? So you're dealing with that, but then you're also dealing with the objectification of the general society. And how, you know, and at that point, it's basically a crapshoot, in a sense that whether or not that child develops a self-esteem, right, really is dependent on meeting some very key people that are able to recognize that they need that, you know, that encouragement and that consistency.
So in addition to working as a couples coach, I also teach at the university out here at Arizona State. And I've come to realize what a special pocket that population is, because these young adults are just leaving kind of the bubble of what they've been raised with and what they've been taught and sheltered in, and just dipping their toe into reality. And so there's this sweet spot of catching them as they're just able to start thinking outside of what they've been told to believe. And seeing the light bulb go off when they realize, like, oh, this is actually what racism looks like. This is actually what sexism looks like. Like, this is how it does exist. And that light bulb going off is kind of addicting.
Yeah.
And so when Penn came to ASU, I think both of us felt like that was a really beautiful experience, because as much as the draw was having a big celebrity there, that energy dissipated, I think, really quickly. I don't know what you think, Penn.
They were disappointed. Let's be honest.
They hate it. No, the energy of, like, you know, fanning over somebody famous was very quickly replaced with hunger for, like, a genuine, true conversation. And I see it every single day in my classes. They're hungry for this. They're terrified of it, but they're hungry for it at the same time. And so we're taking this conversation to the university circuit to really encourage, to hold a space to explore this together, and to encourage people to start living with courage, and making choices that, and standing up for things that might be a bit uncomfortable, but that are necessary, and also encouraging them to infuse their dialogue with a different energy. And it's landing. Like, even yesterday, I was having a conversation with a student of mine who her family is from India, but she identifies as, I think, bisexual, and she's basically broken all societal expectations of, like, you know, how her life should look, and what she should be, and how she should engage with society. And she came up to me after class and was talking about how she got into an online fight with people. And she's like, what do I do? How do I handle this? And we just spent a few minutes kind of unpacking, like, what's your ego and what is effective? Like, what is and what is proactive, what is effective? And it felt like it landed. At the very least, she's thinking about it. And I think if we could do this on a large scale, I think the ripple effects of it, even in a small scale, even in a class of like 40 students, it's powerful, let alone, you know, in a university setting where you've got like hundreds of people that are now thinking about something that is so contrary to what society would have you think is the way to handle this sort of thing.
Yeah, I think what you identified and what you talked about, engaging around these conversations in a way that are, life affirming, as opposed to detrimental. And it sounds to me like that's kind of like the goal, perhaps, in the work that you all are engaged in. You're trying to cultivate that in these conversations and these dialogues when you all are pairing up and doing these public presentations. I think that's incredible work.
I think it's interesting you talk about that it's addicting. When you awaken, you know, I call it like the radical awakening.
Yeah. When
you have this awakening to how things have been that you didn't know about.
Yeah.
And what events or what traumas have occurred in your life that are reflective in your character and your personality, and how that's going to affect the people around you.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that is happening in this moment. And it happens later on in life, but it seems to me, and maybe just because I work with children or youth, gosh, so much of this could be prevented, or so much of the violence could be prevented if we actually focused on the way that we're rearing our children. I mean, so much. I mean, I feel like mothers and fathers are completely discounted in their work when it comes to the child.
Yeah.
But if you're wanting to eradicate this type of violence that exists in the world, this is the most, the educator, whoever that might be, it is the most important role that you could play in society. It is the most important form of activism.
Yeah.
It's you're going to the root. And I don't think we support our educators enough. I don't think we support the women and mothers and their role as educators, and the father, their roles as educators, to be able to sustain the type of life that we're all trying to fight for.
Yeah.
And you look like you were going to say something.
I'm just listening, because there's so many facets to it. And I think, first of all, what Nava was just saying is so true. I have a 1-year-old now, and I have a 12-year-old stepson, and it's like they need very different kinds of stimulation, different kinds of attention, different kinds of care. And now, as a full-time biological parent and a step parent, I just see with painful clarity, because it's just foisted on you, wow, how little genuine support there is for families. There's not a lot of space for it in our culture. There's just not a lot of space for it. But, as it pertains to her, and as it pertains to what Nura and I are working on, I think everybody has a way to contribute. And Nura is I encourage Nura to be very hopeful about what we're trying to do at like a large scale. But as a person who's lived in the sort of public eye for over half my life, I have developed an unhealthy cynicism around that, and I need encouragement around that. But I like to also I also like to think of it like this, you know, what Nura does in her sort of local community and what I do in mine, like those I think are ultimately have to be considered the most meaningful. What we all do, like where we live and in real time with the people we love and the people we live around, to whom we have responsibility and who have responsibilities to us, that is always going to be the most meaningful forum for social change. It's always going. That's what grassroots organizing is about. That's what activists have right. That's where it's going to happen. That is where people suffer as a result of, you know, insensitive decisions made at the top. But it's also where everything comes from. Yeah. That's where life is lived. So what we're doing is simply like, and because I'm famous, let's just call it what it is. You know. We're going to also try and offer some of these insights to larger numbers of people. Yeah. And to whatever degree that can have a positive effect, great. But I think as a reflex, I don't try to put too much stock in it, because the whole point of this age is that we are trying to deconstruct this patriarchal notion of like top-down wisdom and political action and social change. You know what I mean? Like, you're not going to get it from me. Yeah. You're not gonna get, I am a guy on a show. Yeah. In a way, we got to stop looking to people like me. But in the meantime, while you're not, hi, my name is Penn Badgley. I'm going to be speaking at Arizona State University with Nura Mowzoon. She has a doctorate in family and marriage counseling. I'm also the star of You. You can catch me on Netflix on October 15th. We're going to be speaking at the University of Illinois.
And that is what 14th. We call a plug. Yeah, this has been freaking amazing, guys. We're so happy that you were able to join us today. Yeah. And I think there's a lot that we can learn about how to build effective, constructive relationships that are empowering on both sides, that are so essential to moving community forward, moving our society forward. And I think there was a lot of nuggets that you guys offered today that will really give people guidance in how to build those relationships as they go about doing this work of changing our society in a positive way. So thank you guys, man, for the work you do. Love you guys, man. Much love, much respect. Praying for you guys, lifting you up in the work you do, and just celebrating your gifts and your talents. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you guys so much for having us.
You got it. Take care, guys.
See you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.